The sky above Ashara had not been blue for 30 days. Smoke and fire had painted it in shades of orange and black. The beautiful cities that once touched the clouds now lay in ruins. The gardens that had bloomed for 1,000 years were nothing but ash. Kira stood at the window of the last standing tower in the capital city. She was old now, her silver hair falling past her shoulders, her pale blue skin marked with the lines of many years. She was the last surviving member of the High Council. The others had died in the first wave of attacks. Some had died fighting. Some had died protecting children. All had died believing that help would never come. The Dominion had arrived without warning. Their ships had blocked out the sun. Their soldiers had poured from the sky like rain. The Valori were a peaceful people. They had poets and artists and healers. They did not have warriors. They did not have weapons that could fight back against an empire that had conquered 100 worlds. Kira watched another building fall in the distance. She could hear the screams even from here. The Dominion did not just conquer. They destroyed. They took what they wanted and burned the rest. They captured the young and the strong for slavery. They killed the old and the weak for sport. Her daughter Yuna entered the room. She was young, barely past her 20th year. Her eyes, once bright with hope and dreams, were now empty. She had seen too much death. She had lost too many friends. "Mother," Yuna said softly, "the Eastern District has fallen. They are coming this way. We have perhaps one day before they reach us." Kira did not turn from the window. "I know. What do we do?" Kira was silent for a long moment. Then she walked to the center of the room where a large stone pedestal stood. On it rested an object that looked like a crystal flower. It was old. Older than the city. Older than their recorded history. It had been passed down through generations of the High Council, and with it came a story that most believed was just a myth. "Do you know what this is?" Kira asked. Yuna shook her head. "I have seen it in the council chamber all my life, but I never knew its purpose." "It is called a beacon," Kira said. "Long ago, before our grandmothers were born, our people made contact with another species from a distant world. They called themselves humans. They came from a planet named Terra." Yuna had heard the old stories. Every child on Ashara had. Stories of small creatures with soft skin and short lives. Stories of beings who lived on a world so dangerous that it should have killed them. Stories that ended with a promise. "The humans left us this beacon," Kira continued. "They said that if we ever needed help, if we ever faced an enemy we could not defeat, we should activate it. They said they would come." "That was centuries ago," Yuna said. "Even if the stories are true, why would they remember us? Why would they care?" "I do not know if they will," Kira admitted. "But we have no other choice. The Dominion will kill us all. Our fleet is destroyed. Our army is gone. This beacon is the only hope we have left." Yuna looked at the crystal flower. It seemed so small, so fragile, just like the hope it represented. "Do it," she said. Kira placed her hands on the beacon. She closed her eyes and pushed her thoughts into it, just as the ancient texts had instructed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystal began to glow. It pulsed with a soft blue light that grew brighter and brighter until it filled the entire room. Then it stopped. The beacon went dark. "Is that it?" Yuna asked. "I do not know," Kira said. "I have done what the text said to do. Now we can only wait." They waited through the night. The sounds of battle grew closer. The Dominion forces pushed through the last defenses of the city. Valori soldiers, brave but outmatched, fell one by one. By morning, the enemy was at the gates of the tower. Yuna stood with her mother on the highest balcony. Below them, thousands of Dominion soldiers gathered. Their commander, a massive creature in black armor, looked up at them and laughed. "Surrender," he shouted. Give us your leaders, and we will make your deaths quick. Resist, and you will suffer." Kira said nothing. She simply stared at the sky. Yuna felt tears running down her face. She had hoped, despite everything, that the stories were true. That somewhere out there, someone would come to save them. But the sky was empty. Just smoke and clouds and the ships of their enemies. "No one is coming," she whispered. "We are alone." Kira took her daughter's hand. "Then we will die together. And we will die free." The Dominion commander raised his weapon. His soldiers prepared to storm the tower. This was the end. The last day of the Valori people. Then Yuna saw something. A flicker in the clouds. A light that was not fire. She blinked, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her. But the light grew. It became many lights. Dozens. Hundreds. The clouds split open. Ships fell from the sky. Not Dominion ships. These were different. They were angular and sharp, painted in colors of gray and black. They were not elegant or beautiful. They looked like they were built for one purpose, only. War. The Dominion commander stopped laughing. He looked up, and for the first time, Yuna saw fear on his face. The ships screamed through the atmosphere, leaving trails of fire behind them. They were not slowing down. They were not being careful. They were diving straight toward the enemy like falling stars. One of the ships flew directly over the tower, so close that Yuna could feel the heat of its engines. On its side, she saw words written in a language she did not understand. But somehow, the meaning was clear in her mind. Terran Expeditionary Force, 7th Fleet. The humans had come. Kira fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "They remembered," she whispered. After all this time, they remembered. Below them, chaos erupted. The Dominion soldiers were running, shouting, trying to form defensive lines. But it was too late. The Terran ships opened fire. Explosions bloomed across the battlefield. Then the dropships came. Smaller craft that fell from the larger vessels like seeds from a flower. They hit the ground hard, their doors already opening before they had stopped moving, and from inside them came the warriors of Terra. Yuna watched as armored figures poured out of the dropships. They were small compared to the Dominion soldiers. They were soft and fragile, just like the story said. But they moved with a speed and fury that made the stories seem like lies. They did not hesitate. They did not hide. They charged straight into the enemy with weapons blazing and voices raised in battle cries that echoed across the burning city. The Dominion had conquered 100 worlds. They had never been defeated. Today, that was going to change. Yuna gripped her mother's hand as she watched the battle below. For the first time in 30 days, she felt something she had forgotten was possible. Hope. Captain Taiho Park was the first to hit the ground. His boots slammed into the broken street, his rifle already raised and firing before the dust had settled around him. Behind him, the rest of his squad poured out of the dropship in a wave of steel and fury. "Move! Move! Move!" He shouted into his helmet radio. "Alpha Team, take the left flank. Beta Team, push through the center. Do not let them regroup." The Dominion soldiers were confused. They had expected easy prey. They had expected a broken people ready to surrender. Instead, they found themselves facing warriors who seemed to have no fear of death. Taiho fired 3 shots. 3 enemies fell. He did not stop to watch them drop. He was already moving, already finding his next target. This was what he had trained for his entire life. This was what every Terran soldier trained for. They called it the doctrine of violence. It was simple. When you fight with everything you have. You do not hold back. You do not hesitate. You hit the enemy so hard and so fast that they cannot think. You give them no time to plan, no time to react. You become a storm, and storms do not show mercy. Lieutenant Hanayun's voice crackled in his ear. Captain, I have eyes on the enemy commander. He is pulling back toward the eastern plaza. Should we pursue? Negative, Taiho replied. Secure the civilians first. The commander can wait. Lives cannot. Understood. Taiho ducked behind a fallen pillar as enemy fire exploded around him. Two of his soldiers, Private Subin and Sergeant Jiho, took positions beside him. There are survivors in that building, Jiho said, pointing to a damaged structure across the street. I can see them through the windows. Looks like children. Then we get them out, Taiho said. Subin, cover fire. Jiho with me. They moved as one. Subin rose from cover and fired a steady stream of shots at the enemy positions, forcing them to duck. Taiho and Jiho sprinted across the open ground, their armor deflecting the few shots that came close. They reached the building and kicked through the door. Inside, they found a group of Valori huddled in the corner. There were 7 of them, 4 adults and 3 children. They looked up at the Terran soldiers with wide, terrified eyes. Jiho removed his helmet. He had a young face, kind eyes. He smiled at the children and spoke in a gentle voice. It is okay. We are here to help. You are safe now. One of the adults, an elderly male with silver hair, stared at him in disbelief. You are human? From Terra? Yes, Jiho said. We received your beacon. We came as fast as we could. The old Valori began to weep. We thought the stories were myths. We thought no one would come. We will always come, Jiho said. Now please, follow us. We need to get you somewhere safe. Outside, the battle raged on. The Dominion forces were larger in number, but they were not prepared for the way the Terrans fought. The humans did not form neat lines. They did not follow predictable patterns. They moved like water, flowing around obstacles, finding gaps in the enemy defenses, striking from angles that should have been impossible. Lieutenant Hana led her team through the streets, clearing building after building. She was small even by human standards, but she moved with deadly precision. Her rifle never missed. Her orders were clear and sharp. Contact left. One of her soldiers, shouted. Hana spun and fired. The Dominion soldier fell before he could pull his trigger. Keep moving, she said. We need to reach the central plaza before they can set up artillery. The Dominion commander, a creature called General Vorn, watched the battle from his position on a nearby hill. He had conquered 12 worlds. He had crushed rebellions and destroyed armies. He had never lost a battle, but something was wrong. His forces were falling too quickly. These humans, these small and weak creatures, were cutting through his soldiers like they were nothing. What is happening? He demanded. They are just humans. They have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. How are they doing this? His aide, a nervous officer, checked his tactical display. Sir, they are not fighting like any species we have encountered. They do not seem to care about their own survival. They charge directly into our strongest positions. They take wounds that should kill them and keep fighting. Impossible, Vorn growled. Sir, we have lost 40% of our ground forces in the last hour. I recommend we fall back and request reinforcements. Vorn turned and struck his aide across the face. We do not retreat. We are the Dominion. We conquer. Send in the reserve units. All of them. Crush these insects. Back in the city, Taiho received word that enemy reinforcements were incoming. He gathered his squad leaders for a quick briefing. We have about 3,000 more hostiles coming from the north, he said. Our mission has not changed. We hold this city until the main fleet arrives. That means we protect every civilian we can find, and we make the Dominion pay for every inch of ground. How long until the fleet gets here? Hannah asked. 7 days. The soldiers exchanged looks. 7 days against an enemy that outnumbered them 10-1. 7 days of constant fighting with limited supplies and no reinforcements. Sergeant Ji-ho smiled. Sounds like a fair fight. The others laughed. It was a Terran kind of humor. Dark and sharp, born from a species that had spent its entire existence fighting against impossible odds. Tai-ho looked at his soldiers. They were tired. They were wounded. But not one of them suggested retreat. Not one of them asked if they could leave. "We are Terrans," he said. "We do not run. We do not surrender. And we do not leave anyone behind." These people called for help. We answered. Now we finished the job. The soldiers raised their fists in salute. Then they returned to their positions and prepared for the next wave. On the balcony of the tower, Yuna watched the battle with growing amazement. She had expected the humans to run when they saw how many enemies they faced. She had expected them to calculate their odds and decide that the Valori were not worth dying for. Instead, she watched them fight harder. She watched them protect Valori civilians they had never met. She watched them carry wounded soldiers on their backs while still firing at the enemy. Her mother stood beside her. The old story said that humans were strange, that they did things that made no sense to other species. "What do you mean?" Yuna asked. "They form bonds with creatures that are not their own kind. They adopt orphans from other species. They mourn the deaths of strangers. They fight wars not for resources or territory, but for ideas, for promises, for things that cannot be touched or measured." Yuna watched as a Terran medic ran into the open to rescue a fallen Valori child. Enemy fire exploded all around him, but he did not stop. He grabbed the child and ran back to cover, shielding her with his own body. "Why would they do that?" Yuna whispered. "Why would they risk their lives for people they do not know?" Kira shook her head slowly. "That is the question every species in the galaxy asks about humans. And the answer is always the same. What answer? Because they are human. That is simply what they do." Below them, the Terran soldiers pushed forward. Building by building, street by street, they were driving the Dominion back. They were winning. And for the first time in her life, Yuna understood why the galaxy feared these small, soft, short-lived creatures from a distant world called Terra. It was not because they were strong. It was not because they were fast. It was not because they had better weapons or better ships. It was because they never stopped. No matter the odds, no matter the cost, they simply never stopped. The fighting had stopped for now. The Dominion had pulled back to regroup, licking their wounds after the first day of battle. They had not expected resistance. They certainly had not expected this. Tai-ho sat on a broken wall in what used to be a market square. His armor was scorched and dented. His muscles ached. He had not slept in over 30 hours. But he was alive, and so were most of his soldiers. Around him, the Terran troops were setting up a temporary camp. Medics treated the wounded. Engineers repaired equipment. Cooks prepared hot meals from field rations. It was controlled chaos, the kind that only veterans could manage. Yuna approached slowly. She had been given permission to visit the human camp as a translator. Her mother was too weak from the stress of the siege, so Yuna had volunteered to go in her place. She was nervous. These creatures had fallen from the sky and saved her world. But she still did not understand them. And things you do not understand are always frightening. Tai-ho noticed her approach. He stood and gave a small bow, a gesture of respect he had learned during the briefing about Valori culture. "You must be Yuna," he said. "Elder Kira's daughter. I am Captain Tai-ho Park." "Yes," Yuna said. Her voice was quiet. "I came to thank you. And to ask questions, if you will answer them." Taiho gestured to a spot on the wall beside him. Sit. Ask whatever you want. We have a few hours before the next attack. Yuna sat. For a long moment, she simply looked at him. He seemed so ordinary. His skin was brown and smooth. His hair was dark and cut short. His eyes were small and round. He had no claws, no scales, no natural weapons of any kind. How? She finally asked. Taeho smiled slightly. You will need to be more specific. How do you fight like that? My people have studied many species across the galaxy. Humans are not the strongest. You are not the fastest. You cannot regenerate wounds. You live only 100 years at most. By all logic, you should be prey. You should be at the bottom of the food chain. But instead, you are this. Taiho was quiet for a moment. He looked up at the smoke-filled sky, thinking about how to explain something that most humans never had to put into words. Let me tell you about Terra, he said. Our homeworld. Other species call it a death world, and they are not wrong. Our planet is covered in dangers. We have storms that can level cities. We have earthquakes that split the ground open. We have floods and fires and droughts. We have diseases that have killed billions of us throughout our history. Yuna listened with wide eyes. She had heard some of this before, but hearing it directly from a human made it feel more real. Our planet is also filled with predators, Taiho continued. Creatures with teeth and claws and venom. Creatures much stronger and faster than us. When humans first appeared, we were weak. We were slow. We should have died out in a single generation. But you did not, Yuna said. No, we did not. Because we learned to do something that no other predator on our world could do. We learned to work together. Not just in small groups, but in large ones. Hundreds, thousands, millions. We learned that one human is weak, but many humans are unstoppable. He picked up a small stone and held it in his palm. One stone is nothing, but 1,000 stones become a wall. 1,000,000 stones become a fortress. That is humanity. We are weak alone. Together, we can move mountains. Yuna thought about this. It was a simple idea, but there was something powerful in its simplicity. But that does not explain everything, she said. I watched your soldiers today. They did not just work together. They risked their lives for strangers. They protected my people as if we were their own family. Why? Taiho nodded slowly. That is harder to explain. It is just how we are. We form bonds easily. We care about things that are not ourselves. When we see someone suffering, we feel their pain. When we see injustice, we feel anger. It is not logical. It is not practical. But it is human. Across the camp, Sergeant Jiho was treating wounded Valori civilians. Yuna watched as he knelt beside an elderly female and gently cleaned a wound on her arm. He spoke to her softly, even though she did not understand his language. His touch was careful, kind. Your medic, Yuna said. He is a soldier. He kills. But he also heals. How can one person be both? Because that is what soldiers are supposed to be, Taiho said. We do not fight because we love violence. We fight because we love the people behind us. The cities. The families. The children who deserve to grow up in peace. Violence is just a tool. What matters is what you use it for. Private Subin walked over and sat down nearby. She was young, barely older than Yuna, with sharp eyes and quick hands. She held out a packet of food. Ration bar, she said. Not great, but it fills your stomach. You should eat. It is going to be a long week. Yuna took the food hesitantly. Thank you. Subin shrugged. We have plenty. Well, not plenty, but enough to share. Yuna took a bite. The The food was strange, dry and dense, but it did not taste bad. She realized she had not eaten anything in almost 2 days. "Can I ask you something?" Subin said. Yuna nodded doubtful quotes. "Why did your people stop fighting?" "Before we arrived, I mean. Your soldiers were barely resisting. Most of your population was just waiting to die." "I do not understand that." It was a blunt question, but Yuna did not feel offended. She could see that Subin was genuinely curious. "We are not warriors," Yuna said slowly. "My people have lived in peace for centuries. We had small conflicts, disagreements between cities or families, but nothing like this. When the Dominion came, we did not know how to fight them. We tried at first. We lost so many people so quickly. After a while, we just lost hope. It seemed pointless to keep fighting when we knew we could not win." Subin frowned. "But if you do not fight, you definitely lose. If you fight, at least you have a chance." "That is easy to say. But when everyone you love is dying around you, when every day brings more pain and loss, hope becomes very hard to hold on to." Taiho spoke up. "Humans understand that feeling too. We have faced dark times. Wars that killed millions. Plagues that wiped out entire cities. There were moments in our history when it seemed like everything was lost. What did you do?" Yuna asked. "We kept fighting anyway. Not because we knew we would win, but because giving up felt worse than dying. There is a saying among humans. It is not about whether you fall. It is about whether you get back up." Lieutenant Hana approached the group. Her arm was wrapped in a bandage, but she moved as if it did not bother her. "Captain, scouts report Dominion movement to the north. They are gathering for another push. Probably tomorrow morning." Taiho stood. "How many?" "At least double what we faced today." The other soldiers tensed. Even Subin lost her casual smile. Those were bad numbers. Very bad numbers. But Taiho just nodded calmly. "Then we prepare. Make sure everyone gets food and rest tonight. Tomorrow we hold the line." Hana looked at Yuna. "You should stay with us in the camp. It is not safe in the outer districts." Yuna hesitated. "I need to return to my mother. She will be worried." "I will send an escort," Taiho said. "And we will post guards around your tower. Your mother is the leader of your people now. She needs to survive." Yuna felt something strange in her chest. These humans, these strangers from a distant world, were protecting her family like it mattered to them. Like she mattered to them. "Why do you care so much?" She asked quietly. "You do not know us. We are nothing to you." Hana knelt down so she was at eye level with Yuna. Her face was tired but kind. "You called for help," Hana said. "That is enough. That is all we need." Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them back, embarrassed by her own emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. Hana smiled and stood. "Do not thank us yet. The war is not over. Save it for when we win." She said it with such confidence, such certainty, that Yuna almost believed it. Almost believed that these strange, small, impossible creatures could actually do what they said. Almost. The second wave came at dawn. The sun had barely touched the horizon when the first shells began to fall. Taiho was already awake. He had slept for only 3 hours, but that was enough. It had to be enough. "All units, defensive positions," he shouted into his radio. "This is going to be bigger than yesterday. Stay focused. Stay alive." The Dominion had not made the same mistake twice. General Vorn had called for reinforcements from the orbital fleet. Thousands of fresh soldiers poured into the city from multiple directions. Heavy artillery units set up on the surrounding hills. Aircraft filled the sky. The Terran forces were outnumbered 10 to 1. Maybe worse. Lieutenant Hana sprinted to Taiho's position, sliding into cover as explosions rocked the street around them. Her face was grim. "They have artillery on the northern ridge. If we do not take it out, they will level this entire district." "Send a strike team," Taiho said. "I already did." They did not make it. Taiho cursed under his breath. He looked around at his soldiers. They were holding their positions, returning fire as best they could, but they were being pushed back. Slowly, steadily, the Dominion was closing in. "I will go myself," he said. "That is suicide," Hana said. "Maybe, but if we do not stop that artillery, everyone here dies anyway." Before Hana could argue, Taiho was moving. He gathered 3 volunteers and headed toward the northern ridge. Private Minho was among them, a young soldier with a quiet voice and steady hands. They moved through the ruined streets, staying low, using the debris as cover. Enemy soldiers were everywhere, but Taiho and his team had trained for this kind of mission. They knew how to be invisible when they needed to be. They reached the base of the ridge just as the artillery fired another volley. The ground shook beneath their feet. In the distance, they heard screams. "Up there," Minho said, pointing to a fortified position near the top of the ridge. 4 guns. Maybe 30 soldiers guarding them. Taiho studied the position. It was well defended. A frontal assault would be impossible with just 4 people. "We need a distraction," he said. Minho looked at him. Something passed between them. An understanding. A decision. "I will do it," Minho said. "No, I need you for the assault, Captain." Minho's voice was calm. "I am the best choice. I am the fastest runner. I can draw their fire long enough for you to get in position. You know this is true." Taiho wanted to argue. He wanted to find another way. But there was no other way, and they both knew it. "Minho." "It is okay, Captain." Minho smiled. It was a peaceful smile, the smile of someone who had made peace with what they were about to do. "I always knew I would die for something. I am glad it is for something that matters." Before Taiho could stop him, Minho broke from cover and ran. He ran straight toward the enemy position, firing his rifle, shouting at the top of his lungs. The Dominion soldiers turned to face this impossible charge. They opened fire. Minho was hit once, twice, 3 times. But he kept running. Taiho moved. He and the other 2 soldiers sprinted up the ridge while the enemy was distracted. They reached the artillery position from the side, catching the gunners by surprise. The fight was fast and brutal. Taiho killed 6 enemies in under 10 seconds. The other soldiers handled the rest. Within a minute, the artillery was silent. Taiho looked down at the base of the ridge. Minho's body lay still in the dirt. He had made it almost all the way before he fell. "Rest well, brother," Taiho whispered. He turned and began the long walk back to his lines. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, there was still a battle to fight. Back in the city, Sergeant Jiho was dealing with his own crisis. A Dominion strike force had broken through the western defenses and was pushing toward a shelter where hundreds of Valori civilians were hiding. "Fall back." One of the soldiers shouted. "No." Jiho grabbed the soldier by the arm. "If we fall back, those people die. We hold here." They were only 12 soldiers against at least 100 enemies. The math was clear. The odds were impossible. Jiho did not care about odds. He set up a position at a narrow street corner where the enemy would be forced to come at them in small groups. He placed his soldiers in overlapping firing positions. Then he waited till the Dominion came. They came in waves, confident in their numbers. They died in waves too. Jiho fought like a demon. His rifle never stopped firing. When it ran out of ammunition, he drew his pistol. When that ran out, he picked up an enemy weapon. When that broke, he used his knife. The battle lasted for 2 hours. 2 hours of constant, desperate fighting. By the end, Jiho was the only one of his squad still standing. His armor was cracked and burned. Blood ran down his face from a wound on his forehead. 3 enemy blades were stuck in his body, but the civilians were safe. He collapsed just as reinforcements arrived. Hannah was leaving them. She saw Jiho lying in a pool of blood, surrounded by enemy bodies, and felt her heart stop. "Medic!" she screamed. "I need a medic now." They carried Jiho to the field hospital. The doctors worked on him for hours, pulling out blades, sealing wounds, fighting to keep his heart beating. When Taiho returned from his mission, he went straight to the hospital. He found Jiho unconscious on a bed, wrapped in bandages, more machine than man with all the tubes and wires attached to him. "Will he live?" Taiho asked. The doctor, a tired woman named Yoonji, looked at him with exhausted eyes. "I do not know. He should be dead. Anyone else would be dead. But he keeps fighting. His heart keeps beating. It is like his body refuses to give up." Taiho nodded. That was Jiho. That was all of them. Outside, the battle continued. The Dominion pushed harder. The Terran forces were running low on everything: ammunition, medical supplies, energy. But they did not break. Not once. That night, Taiho gathered all his remaining officers. The news was not good. "We have lost 30% of our forces," Hana reported. "Ammunition is at 40%. Medical supplies are almost gone. At this rate, we will not last another 3 days." Taiho looked at the faces around him. They were tired, scared. Some were wounded. But not one of them suggested retreat. "I am not going to lie to you," Taiho said. "The situation is bad. The Dominion has more soldiers than we have bullets. If we stay, many of us will die." He paused. The silence was heavy. "But I am staying. Not because I think we can win, but because there are people behind us who cannot fight for themselves. People who called for our help. People who are counting on us." He looked each of them in the eye. "I am staying. Anyone who wants to leave can go. No shame, no judgment. But I am staying." Nobody moved. After a long moment, Hana smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "Well," she said, "I guess we are all dying together then." There was a quiet laugh around the room. It was not the laugh of people who were happy. It was the laugh of people who had made their choice and accepted the consequences. Taiho nodded. Then he activated his radio and sent a message to the Terran fleet, still days away. "This is Captain Taiho Park of the 7th Expeditionary Force. We are holding the city of Ashara. The enemy outnumbers us significantly. Casualties are heavy. Supplies are low. But we are not leaving. I repeat, we are not leaving. Send reinforcements when you can. We will hold until you arrive." He paused. "Or until we cannot hold anymore." He released the radio. In the hospital, Jiho's heart kept beating. In the shelters, the Lori children slept under the protection of human guards. In the streets, soldiers checked their weapons and prepared for another day of war. The night was dark. The odds were impossible, but the warriors of Terra were not giving up. The siege lasted 7 days. 7 days of constant fighting. 7 days of blood and fire and death. 7 days that would be remembered for as long as the Valori people existed. By the 5th day, the Terran forces had been pushed back to a single district surrounding the central tower. They held a perimeter of maybe 2 kilometers. Beyond that perimeter, the Dominion controlled everything. Yuna had refused to stay in the tower. On the 3rd day, she had picked up a rifle from a fallen soldier and joined the defensive lines. Lieutenant Hana had tried to stop her, but Yuna would not listen. "My people are dying," she had said. "Your people are dying for us. I will not sit safely while others fight in my place." Hana had looked at her for a long moment. Then she had nodded and shown her how to use the weapon. Now Yuna crouched behind a barricade, her hand shaking but steady enough to aim. The rifle felt heavy and strange, but she was learning. She had to learn. Beside her, Hana was calm despite the chaos. Her arm was wrapped in fresh bandages. She had been wounded again yesterday, but refused to leave the front line. "Keep your breathing steady," Hana said. "Do not hold your breath when you shoot. Just breathe normally and squeeze the trigger between heartbeats." Yuna nodded and tried to do as she was told. An enemy soldier appeared in the distance. She aimed. She breathed. She fired. The soldier fell. It was her first kill. She expected to feel something: horror, guilt, triumph, but she felt only emptiness. There was no time for feelings. "Good shot," Hana said. "Now find another target." The fighting continued. Hour after hour. Wave after wave. The Dominion threw everything they had at the Terran defenses, and the Terrans threw everything back. That night, during a brief pause in the fighting, Yuna sat with Hana in a quiet corner of the camp. Both of them were exhausted. Both of them were covered in dust and blood. Yuna looked at Hana's wounded arm. "Does it hurt?" "Yes." "Then why you keep fighting? You could rest. Let others take your place." Hana smiled tiredly. "Because every person who rests is one less person on the line. And every person not on the line makes it harder for everyone else. We are all tired. We are all hurting. But we cannot stop until it is over." "I do not understand how you do it," Yuna said quietly. "How you keep going when everything seems hopeless." Hana was silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "My grandmother told me a story once. During the dark times on Earth, there was a great war. A terrible war. Millions of people died. Cities were destroyed. It seemed like the world would end." Yuna listened. In one city, a small group of soldiers was surrounded by the enemy. They were outnumbered. They had no supplies. No reinforcements were coming. Every logical calculation said they should surrender. That fighting was pointless. What did they do? They fought anyway. For days, weeks. They fought until there was almost no one left. And when people asked them why they kept fighting when there was no hope, do you know what they said? Yuna shook her head. They said, "We do not fight because we hate what is in front of us. We fight because we love what is behind us." The words hung in the air between them. Yuna thought about her mother, about the children in the shelters, about her world, broken but still alive. "I think I understand," she whispered. Hana nodded. "That is why we came. That is why we are here. Not because we hate the Dominion, although we do, but because there are people here worth protecting, worth dying for." On the 6th day, they almost lost everything. The Dominion launched their biggest assault yet. Thousands of soldiers hit the Terran lines at once. The defenses began to crumble. Soldiers fell faster than they could be replaced. Captain Taiho was everywhere at once, moving from position to position, rallying his troops, plugging gaps in the line. But even he could not be everywhere. Even he was just one person. A section of the perimeter collapsed. Dominion soldiers poured through the gap, heading straight for the hospital where the wounded were being kept. Jiho was still in that hospital. He had woken up 2 days ago but was too injured to fight. He was lying in a bed when he heard the gunfire getting closer. He tried to stand. His body screamed in protest. His wounds were barely healed. Moving was agony, but he moved anyway. He grabbed the rifle from a dead soldier and limped toward the door. Outside, he saw enemy troops approaching. Behind him, the hospital was full of wounded soldiers and civilians. People who could not fight. People who could not run. Jiho raised his rifle. "You want them?" he said, his voice rough. "Come and take them." He held that doorway for 15 minutes. 15 minutes of constant fighting. Enemy bodies piled up in front of him. He took more wounds. His legs gave out, and he dropped to his knees. But he kept firing. When reinforcements finally arrived, led by Taiho himself, they found Jiho slumped against the doorframe. His rifle was empty. His armor was destroyed. He had 23 new wounds on top of his old ones, but the hospital was safe. Not one enemy had gotten past him. "Medic!" Taiho shouted, just as he had shouted before. They carried Jiho back inside. The doctors worked on him again. Again, they said he should be dead. Again, his heart refused to stop beating. That night, after the attack had been repelled, Taiho gathered the survivors. There were not many left. Maybe 300 soldiers from an original force of 2,000. "The main fleet will be here tomorrow," he told them. "One more day. That is all we need to hold. One more day. One more day." It sounded so simple, but everyone knew what that one day would cost. Yuna stood among the soldiers. She was no longer just a translator. She was one of them now. Her rifle was scratched and worn from use. Her hands were calloused from fighting. She had killed more enemies than she could count. She thought about who she had been a week ago. A scared girl hiding in a tower, waiting to die. She was not that girl anymore. The humans had taught her something. They had shown her that hope was not something you waited for. It was something you fought for. She looked at Hannah, standing beside her. The lieutenant was barely standing. Her wounds had gotten worse. She should have been in the hospital, but she refused to leave. "One more day," Yuna said. Hannah nodded. "One more day." Around them, the soldiers checked their weapons. Medics handed out the last of the medical supplies. Cooks distributed the final rations. Everyone knew this would be the hardest fight yet. The Dominion was not stupid. They knew the fleet was coming. They would throw everything they had at the city before reinforcements could arrive. Tomorrow would be the final battle. One way or another, Taiho stood on a pile of rubble and looked out at the enemy lines. Thousands of Dominion soldiers were gathering in the darkness. Tomorrow they would come. Tomorrow, many more people would die. He thought about Minho, about all the soldiers who had fallen, about the promise they had made when they received the beacon. "We will come." They had come. They had fought. Many had died. But they had kept their promise. And tomorrow, they would keep it again. Taiho looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the fleet was racing toward them. Admiral Doyun would not let them down. He never did. "One more day," Taiho whispered to himself. "Just hold on for one more day." He climbed down from the rubble and went to check on his soldiers. There was no time for rest. No time for fear. There was only the mission, and the mission was not over yet. The seventh day began in silence. The kind of silence that comes before a storm. The kind of silence that makes the heart beat faster and the hands grip weapons tighter. Taiho stood at the center of the defensive line. Around him, his soldiers waited. 300 Terrans and maybe 50 Valori volunteers who had picked up weapons over the past week. Behind them, thousands of civilians huddled in shelters, praying to whatever gods they believed in. In front of them, the Dominion army stretched as far as the eye could see. 10,000 soldiers. Maybe more. Artillery, tanks, aircraft, everything General Vorn had left. Vorn himself stood at the front of his army, his massive form visible even from this distance. He wanted the humans to see him. He wanted them to know who would destroy them. The Dominion general raised his arm. Then he brought it down. The army charged. Taiho watched them come. Wave after wave of enemies rushing toward their position. The ground shook under their feet. The air filled with their war cries. "Hold," Taiho said calmly into his radio. "Wait for my command." The enemy got closer. 500 meters. 400. 300. Hold. 200 meters. 150. Now. The Terran line opened fire. Every weapon they had, all at once. The sound was like thunder. The first wave of Dominion soldiers fell before they even understood what was happening. But there were too many. For every enemy that fell, 10 more took their place. The Dominion soldiers crashed against the Terran, defenses like a wave against a rock. The rock held. Hannah led a countercharge against a group of enemies that had broken through on the left flank. Her wounded arm slowed her down, but her aim was still perfect. She cut through the enemy soldiers like they were made of paper. Una fought beside her, no longer hesitant, no longer afraid. She had learned well. Her shots were accurate. Her movements were quick. She was not the scared girl who had watched the sky from a tower anymore. She was a warrior. Private Subin had set up a sniper position in a ruined building. She picked off enemy officers one by one, causing chaos in the Dominion command structure. Every shot counted. Every kill saved lives. The battle raged for hours. The Terran line bent, buckled, nearly broke a dozen times. But it never fell. Every time the enemy pushed forward, the soldiers pushed back. Taiho was in the thick of it, fighting hand-to-hand when his rifle ran dry. He killed an enemy with his bare hands, picked up the fallen soldier's weapon, and kept fighting. Blood covered his armor. Some of it was his own. He did not care. By midday, the Terran forces had been pushed back to their final position. The central tower. This was the last stand. There was nowhere else to go. Vorn himself led the final assault. He wanted to personally destroy these insects who had dared to defy his army. He strode through the battlefield, killing any human who came near him. His size and strength made him nearly unstoppable. He reached the base of the tower and looked up at the defenders above. Surrender. He roared. You cannot win. Your fleet is not coming. You are alone. Taiho stepped forward. He was covered in wounds. His armor was cracked, but he stood straight and tall. We are not alone, he said. We have each other, and we are not going to surrender. Vorn laughed. Then you will die. Maybe, but we will take you with us. Before Vorn could respond, the sky split open. It started as a flicker of light high above the atmosphere. Then the flicker became many lights. Dozens. Hundreds. Ships. Terran. Ships. The main fleet had arrived. 100 warships tore through the clouds, their engines screaming as they descended into the atmosphere. They were not sleek or elegant. They were angular and brutal, built for one purpose only. Destruction. Admiral Do Yun Shen stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the battlefield below. He was an older man with gray hair and hard eyes. He'd been a soldier before he was an admiral. He knew what his people on the ground were going through. All ships, he said calmly. Target the Dominion fleet. Leave nothing standing. The Terran fleet opened fire. Railgun rounds the size of cars slammed into Dominion cruisers, tearing them apart from the inside. Missiles streaked across the sky, leaving trails of fire. Fighter craft swarmed out of the larger ships, engaging enemy aircraft in brutal dogfights. The Dominion fleet, caught between the ground forces and the armada above, tried to fight back. But they were outmatched. The Terrans had designed their weapons for exactly this kind of battle. Close range. Maximum destruction. One by one, the Dominion ships began to fall. They crashed into the ocean. They exploded in mid-air. They fled into space, only to be chased down and destroyed. On the ground, General Vorn watched in disbelief. His fleet, his army, everything he had built, everything he had conquered, was being destroyed by these small, weak, impossible creatures. No, he whispered. This is not possible. It is very possible, Taiho said. You made a mistake, General. You thought you were facing a species like any other. You thought numbers and strength were all that mattered. You were wrong. Vorn turned to face Taiho. His eyes burned with rage. I will kill you myself, he snarled. He charged. Taiho stood his ground. They met in a clash of metal and fury. Vorn was bigger, stronger, faster. He should have won easily. But Taiho had something Vorn did not understand. Something no amount of strength could match. He had nothing left to lose. Taiho fought like a man possessed. Every blow he took, he returned with 3 of his own. Every wound he received, he ignored. He was not fighting for victory. He was fighting for the people behind him, for the soldiers who had died, for the promise he had made. The fight lasted 5 minutes. It felt like hours. In the end, Taiho drove his combat knife into a gap in Vorn's armor, right through the general's heart. The massive creature stumbled back, shock in his eyes. How? Vorn gasped. You are weak. You are nothing. Taiho pulled out the knife and watched the general fall. We are human, he said quietly. That is how. Around them, the battle was ending. With their fleet destroyed and their general dead, the Dominion soldiers began to surrender. Those who did not were killed. Those who did were taken prisoner. By sunset, it was over. Taiho stood in the ruins of the city, surrounded by his soldiers. 300 Terrans had gone into the final battle. Fewer than 100 had survived, but they had won. Admiral Do Yoon's shuttle landed in the central square. The old admiral stepped out and walked to where Taiho was standing. He looked at the young captain for a long moment. You held, Do Yoon said. We held, Taiho agreed. Do Yoon looked around at the soldiers, at the Valori civilians emerging from their shelters, at the bodies being carried away for burial. The Dominion will send more ships, Do Yoon said. This is not the end, I know, but today you won. Taiho shook his head. No, today we survived. Winning will take longer. Do Yoon smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. That is the Terran way, he said. We survive. We keep fighting. We never give up. Eventually, we win. He put a hand on Taiho's shoulder. You did good, Captain. Your soldiers did good. Terra will remember this day. Taiho looked at the faces around him. Hana, her arm finally in a proper sling. Subin, cleaning her rifle with shaking hands. Jiho somehow still alive, being carried out of the hospital on a stretcher. And Yuna, the Valori girl who had become a warrior, who had fought beside them, bled beside them. We all did good, Taiho said. Every single one of us. Above them, the Terran fleet hung in the sky like stars. Behind them, the people of Ashara began to emerge into a world that was no longer under siege. The war was not over. It would never be truly over. But today, hope had won, and that was enough. 1 month had passed since the battle. Ashara was slowly healing. The fires had stopped burning. The smoke had cleared from the sky. For the first time in what felt like forever, Yuna could see the blue again. The real blue. Not the orange of flames or the black of destruction. The Terran fleet remained in orbit. They had sent engineers and doctors and supplies. They helped rebuild what the Dominion had destroyed. They treated the wounded. They fed the hungry. They did not ask for payment. They did not ask for control. They simply helped. Today was a special day. A ceremony to honor the fallen. A large garden had been created in the central square, where the final battle had taken place. Trees and flowers had been planted among the ruins. Paths of white stone wound between patches of green grass. At the center stood a monument, a tall pillar of black stone with names carved into its surface. Terran names and Valori names. Side by side, together, Yuna walked through the garden with her mother. Kira was stronger now. She had recovered from the stress of the siege and had returned to her duties as the leader of her people. But there was something different about her. A weight that had not been there before. The weight of survival. The weight of loss. "There are so many names," Kira said softly. "Yes," Yuna replied. They stopped in front of the monument. Yuna found the name she was looking for. Minho Cha, the soldier who had given his life to destroy the artillery. Yunji Kang, a medic who had died defending a shelter full of children. So many others. Terrans and Valori both. "They died for us," Kira said. "People they never knew. People they had no obligation to protect." "That is who they are," Yuna said. "That is what humans do." The ceremony began. Admiral Doyen stood at a small platform in front of the monument. Captain Taiho stood beside him, along with the surviving officers of the ground forces. Hana, Subin, even Jiho, who had somehow survived his injuries and was standing on his own 2 feet. The Valori gathered around them. Thousands of people who had survived because strangers from a distant world had answered their call. Dahin spoke first. His voice was clear and strong, but there was sadness in it. "We stand here today to honor those who gave everything. Soldiers who left their homes, their families, their lives to answer a call from people they had never met. They did not fight for glory. They did not fight for reward. They fought because it was right, because someone needed help, because that is what we do." He paused and looked at the monument. "The names on this stone will be remembered. On Terra, on Ashara, on every world that hears this story. These were ordinary people who did extraordinary things. They were afraid. They were tired. They were hurt. But they did not stop. They did not give up. And because of them, this world survives." He stepped back. Kira stepped forward. "For generations," she said, "my people believed that the stories of Terra were myths. Tales told to children to give them hope. We did not think anyone would come. We did not think anyone would care." Her voice shook, but she continued. "We were wrong. When we lost hope, when we had nothing left, when we believed we would die alone, Terra's warriors fell from the sky. They fought for us. They bled for us. They died for us. And they never asked why." She looked at Taiho. "I asked your captain once why humans do what they do. Why you help strangers. Why you fight wars that are not yours. He told me something I will never forget." She turned to face the crowd. "He said that once, long ago, humans were alone. No one came for them. They had to save themselves. And they swore that no one who called for help would ever be alone again." Tears rolled down her face. "Today, we make the same promise. The Valori will never forget what Terra has done for us. And if a day ever comes when humans need help, we will be there. We will answer, as you answered us." The crowd was silent. Then, slowly, the Valori began to bow, one by one, then in groups, then all of them together. A gesture of respect, a gesture of gratitude that the Terran soldiers bowed back. After the ceremony, Yuna found Taiho standing alone at the edge of the garden. He was looking at the stars, visible even in the daylight sky. "You are leaving soon," she said. "Yes, tomorrow. There are other calls to answer. Other people who need help." Yuna nodded. She had known this was coming. The humans could not stay forever. They had their own missions, their own duties. "Will we ever see you again?" Taiho turned to face her. He was different from the captain she had first met. There were more lines on his face, more gray in his hair. The siege had aged him, just as it had aged everyone who had survived it. "I do not know," he said honestly. "The galaxy is large. Our duties take us to many places. But I will remember Ashara. I will remember the people who fought beside us. I will remember you. Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. She tried to blink them back, but they fell anyway. I have a question, she said. The same question I asked you during the siege. But I want to hear the answer again. Taiho waited. Why did you come? Really, we are strangers. Our beacon was ancient. You could have ignored it. You could have said it was too far, too dangerous, too costly. But you came anyway. Why? Taiho was quiet for a long moment. He looked up at the stars again. Because once, he said slowly, my people were alone. Long ago, before we went to the stars, we faced many dark times, wars, plagues, disasters. There were moments when it seemed like humanity would not survive. And during those moments, we wished someone would come. We wished someone stronger, someone wiser, someone braver would appear and save us. He met her eyes. No one came. We had to save ourselves. We had to learn to fight our own battles, to heal our own wounds, to build our own future. He put a hand on her shoulder. But we never forgot what it felt like to be alone, to be afraid, to call for help and hear only silence. And we swore that we would never let anyone else feel that way, that if someone called, we would answer. No matter how far, no matter how dangerous, no matter the cost. Yuna wiped her tears. That is who we are, Taiho said. That is what makes us human. He stepped back and gave her a formal bow. Goodbye, Yuna of Ashara. Take care of your people. Rebuild your world. And remember that you are never truly alone. Not anymore. He turned and walked away, toward the shuttle that would take him back to his ship. Back to the stars. Back to the endless mission that was the burden and the pride of every Terran soldier. Yuna watched him go. That night, she stood on the balcony of the tower where she had once watched the world burn. The sky was clear now. The stars were bright. Among them, she could see the lights of the Terran fleet preparing to depart. Her mother joined her. They saved us, Kira said. We owe them everything. They do not want us to owe them, Yuna replied. They just want us to remember, and to help others the way they helped us. She watched as the fleet began to move. Ship by ship, they rose higher into the sky, higher and higher until they were just more stars among millions. Then they were gone. Yuna stayed on the balcony for a long time, looking at the sky, thinking about everything that had happened, about the people who had lived, the people who had died, the promise that had been kept. She thought about Taiho's words, about what it meant to be human, about what it meant to never leave anyone alone. She made her own promise that night, silently, in her heart, where no one else could hear. If anyone ever called for help, she would answer. If anyone ever felt alone, she would be there. She would carry the lesson the humans had taught her. She would pass it on to her children, and her children's children. The warriors of Terra had fallen from the sky and changed everything. Now it was time for the Valori to become warriors too. Not warriors of violence, not warriors of conquest, warriors of hope. And hope, Yuna now knew, was the most powerful weapon in the galaxy.